So welcome to the Young Surgeon Symposium on Business Management. Next we have Dr. Frank Phillips, past president of SOLAS from Rush University, talking to us about how to deal with industry.
Thanks, Jay. And I know the last two speakers are standing between you guys and the bar, so I'll try and be to the point, and I only have about a third of slides the other two previous speakers have had. So yeah, I mean, this is a common issue. I get asked it all the time. I've been involved in different ways with different types of industry for many years, from startups to big companies, and I think it's an area where when you're starting off your career, you've seen people and you sort of think it's a cool thing, but you're not quite sure how to do it. So hopefully I'll give you some very practical tips. So I'm going to sort of get through the philosophy slides and get down to the nitty-gritty. So just think about this. Intellectual property is really the key to being in a powerful position when you either start a company or you deal with existing companies. So think about it. These are just some terms. Patents obviously protect the inventions. Trademarks protect the identity. Copyrights prevent, to some it does, protect the expression. And trade secrets obviously protect your secrets. Really, patents are what are king in sort of the environment we live in. To get a patent, what does that mean? You have to have novelty, which means the invention has to be new. It has to have utility, so it has to be useful. So you can't patent something just because it's a new idea, but it's crap. It has to have some type of utility. And it has to be non-obvious, and that's really a key one. And I've been involved helping some in patent lawsuits where the other side would claim this was obvious to someone skilled in the art, so you should not give that a patent, because anyone could put one and one together and come up with two, so why are you giving these guys a patent? So it's important that it would not have been obvious to someone skilled in the art, in other words, someone in the spine world, when you pursue that patent. Marketability is not a requirement. So in terms of the process, the rules are it's the first to file, right? So it doesn't matter, which obviously favors big, huge companies because they can file patents all day. It used to be if you wrote an article and then someone sort of developed that and then filed it, the article would be prior art and maybe protect you, but now it doesn't matter. It's the first to file. You can easily do a patent assessment on the uspto.gov site. I mean, it's a lot of work, and it doesn't give you all the answers, but it's a very good, if you think you've got this great idea, it's an easy first step, and if you see, 3,000 other ideas similar, you're probably not going to pursue it. You prepare an application. Usually you need a lawyer. It's not very expensive to to initiate the patent process. It gets expensive if you're getting serious about it, and you say, well, I'm going to do it in Europe, and every area in Europe requires a different application, and that gets crazy expensive. But the initial process is relatively inexpensive with a lawyer. You file it at the U.S. Patent Office, and then it goes to the prosecution, where you go back and forth with the Patent Office until hopefully the patent's granted or issued. So why does it matter? I mean, unlike, we kind of get lumped in the drug world, there's no clinician who's treating diabetes who's going to invent like a new drug to cure diabetes, right? But we're in the unique position where we're in the front line. We actually can invent innovative, creative stuff in our everyday life that matters. So, surgeons like to be problem solvers. We're on the front line. We use the technology. We understand what we're trying to achieve. And we're uniquely positioned to participate in developing new ideas, innovating. And when you think about it, innovation for the sake of it, saying, well, I can invent a cage that's got an extra this and that. You've got to say, does it solve a real clinical need? Because those are the inventions that are going to really be valuable. Just doing things because they're a little different, it's probably not going to be valuable either to the field or financially valuable to you. You've got to think outside the box. In today's world, you've got to really think about the regulatory path. You can have a great idea, but if it's going to be an FDA, PMA study, 5 years, $80 million to get to market, probably going to be a long road. And then reimbursement. You're much more likely to be supported and get traction if there's a somewhat ready reimbursement path for this idea. So you've got to think about all of this. I'm going to skip through these kind of innovation slides. So you have a great idea. So the first thing is high return in the field. Get the initial patent work done. It's pretty easy to do. Then you have sort of options. You can go it alone. You can say, I don't need help. I want the whole company for me. So it's expensive, but obviously you're putting money in and time. but it's a high potential downstream reward. It's very time consuming if you're doing something serious and hard to do while you're practicing. And most people have limited expertise. We're not all engineers, we're not all MBAs like Tom Char. You got to kind of figure it out on the go. So the next easy way is just you got to raise money. So you have angel investors who are family, friends, which is good because, they give you a little bit of money. They're not really intrusive, but you don't really get much expertise. You just get money. And the most common mistake I've seen, inventors think all they need is money and they'll be successful. And the truth is that's the last thing you actually need. I know nobody believes me, but I've been doing this for a long time. All these guys, they start a company, they go, if we can raise $2 million, and no, you guys don't have a clue because you're going to suck at doing what you do. And you could give someone $2 million and they're still going to suck at what they do. So money isn't the only thing you need. VCs obviously provide a lot of dollars and expertise because they've done it, they do it for a living, but you're paying the price where you lose equity, they're going to hit you pretty hard, and you start with only 100% of company, suddenly you own 12%, it's not a good feeling. And they get control, but you do get expertise with your money. And also, they tend to have a shorter term horizon. Like, they're not going to invest if they're going to have to stick with you for 10 years. They want to be out of it in 4 years. And then the last option, which is obviously the easiest, is to partner with industry, so partner with spine companies. So they have expertise, they understand the market. Obviously, it mitigates your financial risk because the company you're working with is going to spend most of the money. Remember, interests are not always aligned, right? Like, they may have a slightly different idea of where this is going. Like, you have a great idea, but it's going to cannibalize the existing pedicle screw business. They might go, yeah, this is really good, but like, we make a lot of money off pedicle screws. We're not going to rush to market with this. So you have to be sure that you're aligned with the company, which takes trust, and you got to learn to know each other. Obviously, if you're dealing with industry contracts, need legal scrutiny on your side to protect you. And you should never, this is really important, never deal with reps or sales teams. And that's the most important and the easiest route to go, right? You're talking to your rep, or he brings his regional sale manager, and they say, oh, we love you, you're using a crap load of a product, and you're sitting in the restaurant, you say, oh, I've got this idea, that's not, and then you say, like, start talking. It's really bad from a legal point of view. So you want to deal with management, executives, the development team, not salespeople. It's a bad path to go from protecting you, compliance point of view. And just remember, these relationships in today's world, Sunshine Act and all the others, everything you do is public. So remember, keep that in the back of your mind. So when you partner with industry, it takes time. It's trust and relationships. And I see some of my partners come in super aggressive and they go like, the world owes me, like, industry's making money off me, screw you, you need to like take care of me, it's my time. And it doesn't work. It's a small world. People go from company to company, executives. And if you piss them off, they say, we don't want to work with you, you're a pain, we're never going to work with you, and your reputation, that gets around. So build trust, build relationships, and the more you build that, the more opportunities come your way. Generally, when you work with the industry and you've got a very early stage idea, they're not giving you a lot of money, right? They're going to give you a royalty-based agreement. So they're going to say, okay, partner with us and we'll give you 8% of future sales, which sometimes sounds good, but you've got to assess the size of the market and company penetration. So if you've got a cool widget and it's some small company, probably at the end of the day, they'll like have a tiny share of that widget market and the royalties are not going to be much. On the other hand, you have a pedicle screw product. There are a lot of guys who back in the day with, for example, Medtronic, who had 80% of the market. You had a non-innovator, but you had a royalty on their pedicle screw. You were making tens of millions of dollars. So you got to, when you think about royalty, think of what that means. Further along with your invention, you may get some upfront money, so an outright sale or licensing of your product. Often that's milestone-based. It used to be, okay, you got a great idea, we love it, $100 million. Now they're going to say, we'll give you $10 million up front, then we're going to give you $10 million when you get through the FDA, then we're going to give you $10 million when you do this. So it's typically going to be milestone-based, which is, if you're a big spine company, you're going to do that. You don't want to take the risk. So you got to just be prepared to deal with that and think it through. And again, dependent on your partner, may want to cannibalize existing products. Sometimes you want to get going and they've got 3 million products and they say, well, we're getting to it. This isn't our priority. So you got to figure that out. And you lose control, obviously. They're going to have their own engineer, their own business people. But obviously, that's probably the most sort of straightforward path to commercialization. So when you work with the industry, this next few slides are important. You want to sign a non-disclosure agreement, right? That really protects you and it protects industry, right? Because you really need that, because otherwise you can share your idea and they say, yeah, we were doing that anyway. So you got to have an NDA signed. And you got to think about how much you want to disclose prior to the NDA, because companies won't just sign an NDA, right? Because they've got a lot of things they're developing, and they don't want to see your idea and sign an NDA, and then they've signed it, and then they say after the fact, but we've already been developing this, and then it becomes a mess. So you got to just disclose enough to get them interested in your NDA, but not give everything away. And as I said, work with corporate, not with sales. And then we talked about the patent. Generally, you should file it before you disclose it to a company. If you haven't, you're still sort of protected with a non-disclosure agreement, but I think it's cleaner, easier if at least you filed it. You can modify patents, and there's a lot of steps along the way, but at least have something filed. As I say, it's pretty easy to do it online, but I would say it's going to be a few $1,000s to get a patent attorney for that initial step. The other issue you need to think about, because that's going to come along earlier, not everyone's going to have great ideas, is consulting agreements, right? So it's heavily regulated, scrutinized by the Department of Justice, OIG. So these are the requirements for a proper consulting agreement. This is really important, because you'll get this early on in your career. They need to be in writing, signed by both parties, no verbal stuff. It has to precisely detail your duties. So it can't just say, yeah, you're going to help us, Company A, develop some next great thing. It needs to define exactly what you're doing. It needs to specify the time required with precise rate, and it can't just be made up numbers. It has to be the market rate. So no one's going to give you a $5,000 an hour. The market rate's probably closer to $400 or $500 an hour. That's what the rate has to be. It has to be at least 1 year. It has to be fair market value, obviously not related to sales or any clinical practice, which is why you don't want to deal with sales. And obviously your service must not violate state or federal laws, so like stock and antitrust and all other kinds of laws. When you do royalty agreements, most products have, so this is not your idea. The company says we're developing a new lateral, whatever, and we're putting, we want you to work and we're on that project with us and we'll give you some royalties. So most products have design teams, not an advisor, so the royalties are generally split. You're not going to get 5% royalties if you're working with a company and you don't bring anything unique in terms of IP. And generally, royalty burdens are capped. You can't get any money for any device you or your hospital implants. I mean, most companies are smart. They don't do that, but you just got to be sure, because if you're getting royalties for anything anyone puts in your hospital or in your practice, that's a real no-no. And generally, the terms of the royalty, they can either, if it's a patentable device, which can be code-invented, so they say, we want you to work on our lateral approach, and you together, sitting with a company of engineers, come up with something novel and they file IP, you should be on that IP, on that patent. So then, then generally the royalty payments will be the life of the patent. If there's not IP, it may just be the agreement says this is a 10-year agreement and we're giving you royalties for 10 years. So you got to think through all those type of things. And that's going to be, as you get further along, a not uncommon agreement. So some practical advice. I mean, it's sort of cliche. The front page of the newspaper test is true, and even I've been doing it for a long time, and I legitimately think about that every time I'm talking to some company. Like if this was on the front page of the Chicago Tribune, would I look like a shady dude? And if the answer is yes, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And generally, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, because they're not free lunches. You got to provide services that you get paid for. And really go slow early in your career. And a lot of times fellows call me a year afterwards and they go, some company that I've never heard of offering me all this stuff. And they know, at that stage, you're sort of vulnerable. And really, when, a year out, they're really more maybe interested in how many of their cages you'll put in than your real contribution to developing products. So just be careful early on. And the truth is, be patient. You think, oh my God, this is my first, it's an amazing opportunity. I guarantee in 2 years and 3 years, you'll have other opportunities. So just go slow if you when you deal with companies early on, because sometimes you get into a situation and it's harder to get out of it. Don't sign all-inclusive deals. Some companies in the old days were notorious, you're working on a screw thing, but they'd say, your non-compete is anything that competes with this, and that basically means anything in spine surgery. So really narrow what your field is, what the scope of work is. Like say, if you're working on a facet screw, you shouldn't say screws, it should be very specific. Facet screws placed across the facet joint, ideally from medial to lateral in less than 8 millimeters. You want it as narrow as possible, so you can do other things with other companies and not compete with what you've signed on with company A. Don't be arrogant or naive. You're really not that special. You think you are, but there are a lot of guys like us out there, and there are a lot of smart guys, and everyone who's a spine surgeon is either a smart neurosurgeon or a sort of smart orthopedic surgeon. So you're not amazing. You are, but there are a lot of amazing guys that the companies can deal with. So remember that. Be humble, and at the same time, treat the people you deal with in these companies well, because you're going to need a relationship if it's going to be successful. And remember at the same time, not to be too cynical, but they're not really we all get close to the people in the companies, but ultimately their responsibility isn't to you, right? It's to or to the patients, really. It's to the shareholders to make dollars, and you're just a tiny part of that business, right? So just remember that. Be fair and cordial dealing with the industry. It's a small world. The other thing is disclose. It protects you. People feel nervous about doing it. I've always thought it's like the best protection. So don't feel bad. No one really judges you. And we've done studies like where we've asked patients in our waiting room and published, like, what do you think if your doctor gets royalties? It's bad. Patients love it. They think, oh, he's getting royalties. It must be really good. I love it. I want doctors that get royalties. So, yeah, but it's much better. Disclose to your patients is a big thing. If you're getting any agreement, put it in I have it in informed consent. I list every agreement in my informed consent to my patients. When you go to NAS or this meeting, CME, put it all out there. It's much better. It protects you at the end of the day. So spine rules to live by. Put the patient number one. I mean, that's still, these other things are cool and seductive. But remember, we're still there to take patients, and don't ever do anything as attractive financially or otherwise it might sound if it compromises how you're treating your patients. As I said, all dealing should withstand the front page of the Tribune's test. Put another way, if you wouldn't be proud if your mother read it, don't do it. Other thing, it's all about taking care of patients. So all this other stuff we talk about in the end of the day in the operating room, we've got to be proud of what you did. Another thing I always find amusing, like I'd much rather be the quiet guy in the back of the room with all these things and I'm making crazy money than the guy who's like wants to be in Becker's and says, well, I'm in Becker's all the time because he's actually our practice attorney. So it's like unstoppable. He's been our practice attorney forever. But like the guys who are like our front and center, that's like raising a red flag to the government. Like, oh, we sold this company for $400 million and it's everywhere. That's like the government saying, oh, we should check this guy out. So it's much better to just do your thing, but you don't have to be like making a big noise about what you're doing. Because remember, and I've not been personally involved, but I've been involved in companies, and when the government comes calling, you're done, right? Like the business, the VCs go, okay, find out how much we have to pay to settle this. Because they're never going away. They've got more money, they've got more time, they've got more resources than anyone. So you don't want to raise that flag and get anyone looking at you. So I'm going to end there, and hopefully it gives you a little idea about how to interact with this world around us.
Great, thank you. That was great.